June 25th, 2023. A quiet Sunday morning in unincorporated Decatur, Georgia. The air is still heavy with humidity, the kind that clings to the trees and sidewalks of Misty Waters Drive. Most residents at the Hidden Valley Apartments are still asleep when a single phone call cuts through the calm. At 9:52 a.m., a DeKalb County 911 dispatcher answers a trembling voice. "First of all," the caller begins, "I want to stay anonymous, okay? But there's a little girl's body in building 2815 apartment 27. It looks like she's been there for 6, maybe 7 months." It's the kind of call no one expects to receive. The dispatcher asks for details, but the caller doesn't offer many, just insists it's real and pleads for someone to come quickly. Within minutes, patrol units are en route. When officers reach the address, they find an aging brick apartment complex with peeling paint, quiet courtyards, and overgrown shrubs. To most, it's a place like any other, a patch of affordable housing tucked between highways and strip malls. But one apartment stands out. The number on the door reads 27. When officers knock, there's no response. They call out, "Police? Anyone home?" Nothing. The door handle gives easily. It's unlocked. Inside, the smell hits first. Stale air, mildew, the scent of abandonment. Yet there's nothing overtly alarming. Just scattered furniture, children's toys, half-empty drawers, and the faint echo of a life once lived. Officers move cautiously, checking each room. The bathroom is empty. The bedroom appears untouched. A stroller sits in one corner. Clothes are draped over furniture. A small television rests on a crate. It looks like someone left in a hurry, but there's no sign of anyone living or dying here. After several minutes, the officers clear the scene. The report notes no body found. They mark it as an unfounded complaint and return to patrol. But just 2 hours later, the phone rings again. The same voice. This time more urgent. "I told you what I found," the caller says. "A little girl's body stuffed in the closet. She's still got clothes on. Pink dress. Hair's still there. Please, y'all need to send somebody." The dispatcher tries to calm them down, to collect the same details, but the caller grows frustrated. "That should be all you need." They snap. "That should get somebody moving." It does. A second unit is dispatched. This time, an officer is joined by the complex's security guard, a man who says he's been hearing strange rumors for 2 days. "Somebody told me," he explains, "that a little girl was dead in apartment 27, said she'd been there a long time." When police arrive again, the air outside is thicker, heavier, as if the Georgia heat itself knows what they're about to uncover. They retrace their steps. Same door, same silence. Inside, the smell is stronger now, unmistakable. Something's off. One officer mutters, "You smell that?" They move toward the back bedroom, flashlights cutting through the dim. The beam lands on a small closet door. A pile of clothing spills out near the bottom, but behind it, something darker. When the officer opens the door, the light reveals what no one could prepare for. A small body, folded forward in a stroller. Hair still clinging to the scalp, skin shriveled and darkened by time. For a long moment, no one speaks. The remains appear to belong to a young child. The body is seated upright, torso bent forward, a faded tank top visible across the shoulders. The smell of decay fills the room. Someone whispers, almost inaudibly, "That's a child." They call it in. Crime scene units rush to the location. Detectives follow. The complex becomes a hive of flashing lights and stunned silence. Inside the apartment, investigators begin the grim work of documentation. Photographs are taken, evidence markers placed, every item logged. On a shelf above the stroller, a woman's red purse sits tucked beside a stack of mail. Inside are 2 items that change the trajectory of the case: a bank card and an identification card belonging to a 27-year-old woman named Alondra Hobbs. The name means little at first, but to the property manager, it's familiar. Alondra was a tenant. Or, at least, she used to be. She moved out months earlier after falling behind on rent. Her husband, Cameron Hobbs, had stopped by weeks before asking to be removed from the lease. He said he just wanted to be done with it, the manager recalls. didn't seem upset, just done. Neither Alondra nor Cameron listed children on their rental agreement, but the content of the apartment tell another story. Small shoes, children's toys, and drawings scrawled on loose paper. The medical examiner's office removes the remains for autopsy. Given the level of decomposition, the body is nearly mummified, weighing just a few pounds. Detectives can only guess the child's age, estimating between 5 and 8. As word spreads, neighbors emerge, shaken. One woman tells reporters she hadn't seen the family in months. Another says she thought they'd simply moved out. There was a smell sometimes, she admits, but I figure it was trash left behind. The investigation begins under a cloud of disbelief. Who was this little girl? How long had she been here? And how could no one, no relative, no neighbor, no teacher, have reported her missing? Within 48 hours, dental records confirm what investigators feared most. The body belongs to 7-year-old Alivia Jordan, Alondra Hobbs' eldest daughter. Alivia had never been reported missing. Her younger sisters, ages 2 and 4, are located safely, one with Alondra, the other with Cameron. But Alivia, the oldest, the one with special needs, had simply vanished from everyone's awareness. DeKalb County detectives now face a mystery that defies explanation. A child left in a stroller, in a locked apartment, for months, without a single call of concern, until a stranger stumbled upon the truth. What began as a routine welfare check has turned into a case of unimaginable neglect, one that would expose a trail of missed opportunities, systemic failures, and a mother's devastating confession. And as the first autopsy results return, investigators will learn that Alivia's suffering didn't end when she was left behind. It only began. Her name was Alivia Naomi Jordan, 7 years old, nonverbal, diagnosed with autism, cerebral palsy, and recurring seizures that required daily medication. To those who knew her, she was a quiet, gentle presence, a child who communicated through touch, expression, and silence more than words. She could not tell anyone she was hungry. She could not call for help. And when she was left alone, no one heard her cry. Alivia's mother, Alondra Hobbs, had once described her daughter as a lot to handle. Court records later revealed that she had stopped bringing Alivia to medical appointments nearly a year before the girl's death. The last time a neurology clinic filled her seizure prescription was August 2022. When she failed to appear for a required checkup, they refused further refills. From that moment forward, Alivia went untreated. According to family members, the household at Misty Waters Drive was volatile. Alondra lived there with her 3 daughters and a man named Cameron Hobbs, her husband, but only the biological father of the middle child. The arrangement was fraught with arguments and accusations of abuse. Police were called to domestic disturbances more than once. Neighbors often heard shouting behind the thin apartment walls. It was in this chaos that Alivia slipped from view. Her grandmother would later tell investigators she hadn't seen the girl since early 2022. Relatives asked about her, but Alondra's answers were inconsistent. She told one sister that Alivia was with her dad's family down south. She told another that the child had been placed in special care. But when investigators traced every lead, they found no record of Alivia enrolled in school, no doctor visits, no state services, no custody filings. It was as if she had disappeared, not through abduction, but through neglect. And yet, the authorities had no missing person report, no welfare check. No one outside the family even knew a child named Alivia Jordan existed at that address. When police questioned Cameron Hobbs, he claimed he moved out of the apartment during the summer of 2022. He said he'd taken his biological daughter, the 4-year-old, because he was worried about her safety. There was too much arguing, too much craziness, he said. I didn't want her around that. He insisted Alivia was alive when he left, still in Alondra's care. But Alondra told a different story. She said Cameron was violent, that he'd beat her and the kids, that he wanted her to give up the oldest one to foster care. During interrogation, she portrayed herself as a victim trapped in an abusive relationship, saying she fled because she couldn't take it anymore. Detectives listened but pressed her for specifics. Where was Alivia when you left? Was she alive? Who was supposed to care for her? At first, Alondra hesitated. Then in a low, exhausted voice she answered. She was alive, sitting in her stroller in the bedroom closet. It was a moment that left even seasoned investigators silent. When asked if she left food or water, Alondra nodded. I gave her snacks. A bottle of water. She had chips. Real food. But the search of the apartment revealed nothing. No dishes, no crumbs, no evidence that anyone had eaten there in months. The next question was harder. Why did you leave her? Her answer came without hesitation. It was too much. According to the official transcript of her interview, she explained that she'd gone to her brother's house to chill. She said she meant to come back. But days turned into weeks, then months. She never returned. Alivia was left inside that closet, strapped into a stroller, door closed, the Georgia summer heat pressing against the apartment's thin walls. She had no medication, no care, no one to hear her when she grew weak. By the time the 911 caller discovered her body, she weighed barely 5 pounds. The autopsy later concluded that Alivia died of starvation and dehydration, a prolonged, torturous decline rather than an instantaneous death. The medical examiner found a wadded plastic grocery bag inside her abdominal cavity where her stomach once was. Proof that in her final moments, desperate for something to eat, the child had swallowed what she could reach. Even after that revelation, Alondra continued to insist that she had left Alivia alive. She was fine when I walked out, she told detectives. I loved her. But the facts told another story. The red purse found on top of Alivia's body contained Alondra's identification card and bank card, both of which the mother later claimed her brother had stolen. Police records proved otherwise. Weeks after she said she left her daughter, Alondra reported to officers that her brother had then taken those items, meaning the purse and everything inside it, had been left with Alivia from the start. The same report revealed something else. Alondra had been collecting $900 per month in disability payments on behalf of her daughter, money meant for Alivia's care, continuing long after the child was gone. Family members were horrified. She never told us anything, one relative said. She acted like everything was normal. We didn't even know Alivia, that's what we called her, was missing. By the time of her arrest on June 29, 2023, for days after the discovery, Alondra was staying at a hotel in Marietta with her 2-year-old daughter. The toddler appeared healthy. When detectives approached her, Alondra seemed calm. She said she had no idea why they wanted to talk to her. What they told her next shattered that composure. They had found her oldest child. Her expression changed. She covered her face and began repeating, "Just kill me. Just kill me." But justice doesn't come in the form of vengeance. It comes through truth, confession, and consequence. In the weeks that followed, investigators pieced together the silent months of Alivia's suffering. No school records, no doctors, no visitors, just a locked apartment on Misty Waters Drive, and a little girl slowly fading away. By all accounts, Alivia had the developmental mind of a 2-month-old. She couldn't unbuckle the stroller harness. She couldn't stand or crawl to the door. She likely sat motionless until her body could no longer endure. A forensic analyst later told prosecutors that even experienced investigators were shaken by what they found. "We've seen neglect before," he said, "but nothing like this." For the residents of DeKalb County, the case was beyond comprehension. How could a mother leave her child like that? How could a community go nearly a year without noticing a missing girl? The questions would echo through every courtroom and every news headline for months to come. Because Alivia Jordan, a child who never spoke, had finally been heard, but only after her death. After the discovery of 7-year-old Alivia Jordan's mummified body, detectives returned again and again to the same address, Apartment 27, Building 2815 of the Hidden Valley Complex on Misty Waters Drive, Decatur, Georgia. What they found each time was both ordinary and unbearable. The small, 2-bedroom unit was a portrait of neglect. Unwashed dishes, broken blinds, and a scattering of toys that once belonged to children. The air was heavy with mold and heat. The walls were streaked where pictures had been torn down. And in the back bedroom, a stroller set inside a shallow closet, draped by a dark comforter, the same spot where Alivia's body had been found. To an outsider, the scene seemed frozen in time. But for detectives, it raised haunting questions. How could a child have been left there for months without anyone noticing? The property manager confirmed that the apartment had been under eviction since early 2023. Rent hadn't been paid in months. Utility usage had stopped. There was no running air conditioning. And yet, no one came to remove the contents. No formal cleaning crew, no inspection. The door, according to neighbors, sometimes stood slightly open, other times shut. One neighbor later told reporters, "I thought the smell was just old garbage. I didn't know a child was in there." Inside, investigators found small details that painted a tragic picture of isolation. A girl's pink sandal on the bed, a half-deflated balloon caught behind a dresser, and crayon marks on the lower part of a wall. Faint reminders that a child once lived and played here. What struck detectives most was the quiet. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, nothing to suggest violence. Instead, the apartment felt abandoned in layers, as if the life inside it had slowly drained away rather than ended abruptly. When forensic teams examined the closet, they noted that the stroller's harness buckle was still fastened. Alivia had not been tied down or bound, but she also hadn't moved. The condition of the remains suggested she had stayed in that exact position until death. Her hair, described as in a small puff, was still partly intact. She wore a faded red tank top and a diaper. Medical examiners later concluded that the apartment's heat likely accelerated decomposition, leading to the mummified state that shocked investigators. Yet, even with advanced decay, one truth was unmistakable. The child had been there for many months. When the medical examiner weighed what remained of Alivia, the scale registered only 5 pounds. Her internal organs had liquefied. Forensic anthropologists discovered remnants of plastic and cloth inside her digestive tract, evidence of starvation and desperation. The official report listed her cause of death as starvation and dehydration. But the apartment held another revelation. Among the items cataloged was a red purse resting atop the stroller. Inside were Alondra Hobbs' bank card and identification. This was more than a trace. It was proof that the child's own mother had left her here, intentionally or not. The detectives now faced 2 critical tasks: find Alondra and determine how this could happen without a single missing person alert, welfare check, or school inquiry. Their first question was answered days later. On June 29, 2023, Alondra Hobbs was located in a hotel room in Marietta, roughly 25 miles from Decatur. With her was her 2-year-old daughter, who appeared healthy and unharmed. When officers knocked on the door, Hobbs didn't resist. She seemed confused, then frightened, repeating, "What's going on?" At the station, investigators began the slow, methodical process of questioning. They started gently, asking about her children, their ages, their fathers. She listed 3 names: Alivia, the eldest, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. Then came the question that would change everything. "When was the last time you saw Alivia?" Alondra paused. Her hands trembled. Then she said, "It's been months." Over the course of hours, her story shifted. She said she left Alivia with Cameron, then that she left her alone. She said she gave her food and water, then that she couldn't take it anymore. Eventually, she admitted she placed her daughter in the stroller inside the closet to keep her safe while I went out. Detectives pressed further. "How long were you gone?" She whispered, "I never came back." Meanwhile, forensic teams combed through every detail of Apartment 27, reconstructing the timeline. They determined Alondra likely abandoned her daughter in late February 2023, roughly 4 months before the 911 call. The evidence supported that estimate. Mail stacked on the counter postmarked February, expired food in the fridge, and the extreme state of the body. Throughout those 4 months, neighbors went about their lives, working, raising children, taking out the trash, unaware that just a few steps away, a 7-year-old child was dying behind a closet door. The absence of a missing person report puzzled investigators most. When they reached out to schools, none had records of Alivia's enrollment. The Department of Family and Children's Services confirmed there had been prior interactions with Alondra, but no active case at the time. The system, it seemed, had lost track of the child entirely. Interviews with relatives revealed fragments of a fractured family. Alondra's mother told officers she assumed Alivia was living with relatives down south. Alondra's sister, who worked for the state's Child Services Department, said she hadn't seen the girl since 2022 and believed she was staying with her paternal grandmother. But no one could name that grandmother. No one knew where she lived. Piece by piece, the illusion fell apart. In the following days, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation joined the case to confirm identity through dental records. They matched perfectly to Alivia Naomi Jordan, the little girl no one had been looking for. For detectives, the realization carried a bitter truth. The world hadn't failed to find Alivia. It had simply forgotten to look. Back at apartment 27, investigators conducted one final walkthrough before the unit was sealed for cleanup. The smell of decay still lingered. On the kitchen counter, a small drawing remained taped to the wall, a scribbled stick figure with a smile. Beneath it, written in a child's uneven hand, one word, MOM. The same investigators would later say that image stayed with them longer than any crime scene photo. It symbolized everything the case represented: love, abandonment, and silence. For months, Alivia sat in the dark, unseen. Outside, life continued. Rent notices piled at the door. The world moved on. But death, especially one born in neglect, always leaves traces. And when investigators began piecing those traces together, the story that emerged would devastate an entire community. In the next stage of the investigation, attention would shift from discovery to accountability, to uncover who knew, who failed to act, and who, ultimately, bore the weight of responsibility for a child whose voice had never been heard. By the time detectives sat across from Alondra Hobbs, they already knew most of the facts. They had the purse, they had the autopsy, and they had a child who had been dead for months in her mother's apartment. What they needed now was the truth, in Alondra's own words. The interrogation room at DeKalb County Police Headquarters was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. Alondra sat in a chair, her posture slumped, hands folded in her lap. She looked exhausted but detached, not the panic denial detectives often saw in cases like this. She was read her rights and nodded that she understood. Then she began to talk. At first, her answers came slowly. She confirmed she had 3 daughters, ages 2, 4, and 7. Alivia, she said, was the oldest, her special needs child. The youngest was staying with her. The 4-year-old was with Cameron Hobbs. She described a household that had become, in her words, unbearable. Cameron was violent, she said. He beat her, yelled, broke things. He wanted me to give my baby away, she told detectives, crying. He said she was too much. She said she finally left after one of their fights turned physical, but her story fractured the longer she spoke. Sometimes she said she left with all the children, sometimes only the youngest. Sometimes she claimed Cameron had Alivia. Other times she admitted she did. When investigators pressed, she hesitated. I don't want to talk about that, she whispered. Then came the moment that broke through her walls. A detective leaned forward and asked, When you left that apartment, was Alivia alive? Yes, she said. Where did you leave her? In her stroller, she murmured, eyes downcast. In the closet. Detectives exchanged glances. The admission aligned with what they had already found. The child folded forward, harness still buckled, comforter draped above. Why did you leave her? Alondra's shoulders shook. It was too much. I couldn't handle it anymore. I had nobody, no help. I just needed a break. She claimed she left food and water. I gave her chips and a bottle of water, she said. She was fine. She was watching TV when I left. The detective's tone hardened. You mean you left her alone, knowing she couldn't walk or talk? Alondra didn't answer. When shown photographs from the apartment, the stroller, the purse, the scattered clothes, she began crying again. I loved her, she repeated. I didn't mean for her to die. But love, the investigators thought, could not explain months of silence. They asked why she hadn't returned. She said her brother had called and asked her to come over. I thought I'd go for a night, she said, but things happened. She stayed at his house for weeks, then moved in with a boyfriend. She admitted she never went back to check on Alivia. Detectives paused, letting the confession settle in the room. One of them finally said, "You know she didn't make it, right? You know what we found in that closet." Alondra nodded weakly. "She was still in that stroller," the detective said. "Her body weighed 5 pounds. That's what starvation does to a child. We've seen a lot of things, but none of us have seen anything like that before." The mother looked away. "Just kill me," she said. "I deserve it." But remorse couldn't undo what had already happened. Forensic evidence confirmed what Alondra refused to face. The autopsy listed the cause of death as inanition, extreme exhaustion from starvation and dehydration. Her body contained traces of plastic and cloth in her digestive system, swallowed in desperation. The medical examiner's report ruled out trauma. There were no broken bones, no stab wounds, no gunshots. Alivia had not been murdered violently. She had simply been left to die. To prosecutors, that was even worse. It meant the death was preventable every single day she remained alive in that apartment. Detectives returned to the interrogation room with the autopsy report in hand. They asked one final time, "Did you know she was going to die?" Alondra shook her head. "No, I thought she'd be okay. I left her food. I left her water." The detective's voice was calm but sharp. "There was no food. There was no water. You left her alone in the heat for months." She began sobbing again. "I didn't have a choice." "You had a choice every day," the detective replied. In the following days, police also interviewed Cameron Hobbs, who denied being present when Alivia was left behind. He told them he had moved out months earlier and had assumed Alondra was still caring for all 3 girls. "I never saw that baby again," he said. Cameron was never charged in connection with Alivia's death, though Child Services later removed a surviving daughter for safety reasons. Investigators also located Alondra's Facebook activity. Posts made in April 2023, weeks after Alivia's estimated death, showed her sharing romantic memes, posting selfies, and complaining about relationship troubles. One post read, "The worst thing ever happened to me." When detectives asked what she meant, Alondra said she was referring to getting cheated on. The contradiction between those casual posts and the crime scene evidence deepened the outrage among investigators. "She wasn't in crisis," one said later. "She was living her life." In September 2023, a DeKalb County grand jury indicted Alondra Hobbs on 1 count of malice murder, 2 counts of first-degree cruelty to children, and 2 counts of felony murder. The indictment alleged that she had caused the death of her minor child by leaving her unattended and without the necessities of life. During pre-trial hearings, prosecutors emphasized the deliberate nature of the act. Assistant DA Teresa Campbell stated, "This child died alone in agony. Her suffering was slow, painful, and completely avoidable." The defense requested a psychological evaluation, citing a history of abuse and mental health struggles. But doctors found Alondra competent to stand trial. After months of preparation, in April 2025, Alondra Hobbs entered a non-negotiated guilty plea to malice murder and child cruelty. The felony murder counts were vacated by law. Judge Shondina Morris sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 40 additional years. In the courtroom, reporters described her demeanor as emotionless. She spoke only once to confirm her plea. When the sentence was read, she nodded slightly, as if she had already accepted it long before that day. Outside, District Attorney Sherry Boston addressed the press. "This is one of the most tragic cases we've ever prosecuted. A child who could not speak, who could not defend herself, left to die alone. There is no justice that can undo that." The DA urged parents in crisis to reach out for help. "Resources exist," she said. "Abandonment is never an option." With the conviction complete, investigators finally closed the case file. The photographs, reports, and recordings would be sealed into evidence. But for everyone who worked it, those images would never fade. In the end, the story of Alivia Jordan was not just about a crime. It was about silence. The silence of a child who couldn't ask for help. The silence of neighbors who didn't question the smell. The silence of systems that lost track of a life. And in that silence, a truth emerged that was harder to face than any headline. Sometimes the worst cruelty isn't violent at all. It's simply turning away. The courtroom emptied slowly that April afternoon in 2025. The air outside was heavy with spring rain, the kind that clings to the skin and softens every sound. Inside, the sentence was final. Life in prison without the possibility of parole for 27-year-old Alondra Hobbs, plus 40 additional years. Reporters describe her leaving the courtroom in shackles, head bowed, lips pressed tightly together. She didn't look at anyone, not the prosecutors, not the journalists, not even the empty rows where family members should have been. The case file was closed, but what it revealed had already left a scar on everyone who touched it. In the months that followed, the story of Alivia Naomi Jordan continued to ripple through Georgia and beyond. News outlets replayed the same haunting facts. A 7-year-old girl, nonverbal and disabled, left alone in a closet for months. Her remains discovered only because a stranger refused to ignore a rumor. The details never became easier to hear. The weight, 5 pounds. The diagnosis, autism, cerebral palsy, seizures. The cause of death, starvation and dehydration. A child who depended on others for every moment of care had been abandoned by the one person who was supposed to protect her. Prosecutors said the case was one of the worst examples of child neglect they had ever seen. In a statement to local media, District Attorney Sherry Boston said, "The suffering this child endured is almost beyond comprehension. It was a slow, painful, and lonely death. Our hearts break for what she must have gone through." There was no funeral, no public memorial, no photograph circulated of Olivia's short life, only her mother's mugshot and the apartment where she died. The state confirmed that the remains were handled by the county coroner's office, and though officials offered burial assistance, no family member stepped forward to claim them. Even after the verdict, questions lingered that no sentence could answer. How did a child vanish without a single report? How did agencies lose track of a girl who required constant medical attention? And how many other children slipped through those same cracks, invisible until tragedy forces the world to notice? Child advocacy groups in DeKalb County cited the case as evidence of systemic failure. They pointed to gaps between state departments, welfare checks that stop once parents relocate, medical providers who lose contact after missed appointments, landlords with no requirement to flag suspected abandonment if children aren't listed on a lease. To them, Olivia's death wasn't only a crime. It was an indictment of silence. A silence shared by everyone who had seen just enough to suspect something was wrong, but never acted. The Hidden Valley apartments have since changed management. The unit where Alivia died was renovated and re-leased, but residents say the atmosphere never fully recovered. "You can paint the walls," one neighbor told a local reporter, "but you can't paint over what happened there." The apartment's new tenants reportedly know nothing about its past. To them, it's just another affordable unit in a crowded complex. But for those who remember the police tape, the smell, and the news trucks outside, apartment 27 remains a wound that never quite closes. In the aftermath of the case, Georgia lawmakers discussed strengthening child welfare checks and requiring cross-reporting between health clinics and the Department of Family and Children's Services. Advocates push for reforms ensuring that special needs children who miss multiple appointments trigger an automatic investigation. The proposals came too late for Alivia, but they carried her name through legislative halls, a reminder of the price of inaction. For investigators, the case lingered like a shadow. Detectives who had opened that closet said the image stayed with them. The stroller, the faded red tank top, the tiny body folded forward. One officer later told a reporter off record, "You don't forget that kind of quiet." The room was still, but it felt like it was screaming. In interviews years later, prosecutors described Alondra's demeanor during sentencing as emotionless. Yet, behind that absence of reaction, the reality was clear. She would spend the rest of her life in prison, her name synonymous with the death of her child. No motive could redeem it. No apology could make sense of it. The story of Alivia Jordan became a cautionary tale about what happens when isolation, poverty, and untreated mental illness converge, and when those tasked with oversight fail to connect the dots. But beyond policy and prosecution, what remains is a human cost. A little girl who never learned to speak, a body found in the dark, and a society forced to confront how easily a life can vanish in plain sight. At DeKalb County headquarters, the case file labeled Hobbs, Alondra/Jordan, Alivia, decedent, sits on a shelf among thousands of others. Inside are the photographs, the forensic reports, and the transcripts of a mother explaining why she walked away. Each page ends the same way: a date, a signature, and a notation. Case closed, subject convicted. But for the detectives, nurses, and prosecutors who handled it, closure never really came, because the evidence doesn't fade with time. It stays. The smell of the apartment, the still air, the sound of the closet door opening, and the understanding that this death wasn't hidden by distance or secrecy. It was hidden by neglect. If there's any legacy to Alivia's story, it's the reminder that silence can kill, that every unattended child, every unanswered call, every unopened door carries a risk measured not just in tragedy, but in time lost. Time that can never be returned. For a year, Alivia Jordan's world was reduced to a stroller in the dark. But today, through the investigations, the headlines, and the voices that refuse to look away, she is finally seen, not as a girl forgotten in apartment 27, but as a child who forced an entire community to remember what it means to care.